No matter your age, your plan for retirement can start today. From the News Channel 5 Network, this is the Retirement Report.
Good morning. Welcome to the Retirement Report. I'm Hank Parrott, your host. And we're going to be talking about a lot about the markets today, of course, the Ukraine-Russia thing and what effect that might have on the markets, or what is having on the markets, the volatility. We've got a special guest that's going to be joining me today, Phil Kosmala with Kosmala. Phil's been on before. He's a tremendous asset for us and a resource to have on the show. He's going to talk about the markets and give a little perspective of armed conflicts in the past and how they've impacted the markets and what it might mean to you when you're trying to figure out what to do and how to navigate all this. In addition to that, we're going to be talking about safe money. This is one of those areas when you're looking at volatile times. This is the time when you also want to assess your risk overall and determine, how are some ways that you can help protect yourself in a volatile market such as this. All right. And with all the uncertainty, and we've talked before, not just about what's going on geopolitically as far as, of course, with the Russian aggression and invasion of Ukraine, but also some concerns here in our own country. And there I'm talking about, of course, things like the Federal Reserve. They're going to be meeting next week talking about interest rates going up. So we already had some volatility, if you will, and some negative news affecting the markets prior to this. So this has just magnified that even more. But we still want to bring it back to what's going on in the economy, what's going on with the Federal Reserve, how much are they going to raise rates? Is the Ukraine-Russia thing going to affect how they're going to raise rates, how much they might raise, 0.25%, 0.5% initially on the first meeting, and then how many times, what the pace of that's going to look like. So there are a lot of concerns there, more so than what may be a very temporary kind of impact as far as the geopolitical scene. And again, Phil's going to give us some great insights onto that. In addition, as I said, I think last week it was that we talked about some other safe money options. So we've talked before, Virtue Capital and Phil developed something called a stop loss. This is something you might want to look into. He'll talk a little bit about that and what that might mean. In addition, of course, we talk about fixed index annuities. This is, and annuities in general. They have, the different types of annuities, but in particular, the fixed index annuity, which gives you an opportunity to give better growth than you might on a standard fixed annuity, right? Because it's tied to an index, tied to the market, and based on the performance of the index, you can get additional earnings. And we may, as time permits, I'd like to get into that a little bit more with you. Just again, when you're looking at a time like this, thinking in terms of how you can protect yourself. I've got some great research pieces. Roger Ibbotson, his white paper on index annuities, talking about how index annuities outperform bonds over the long term. So giving you an opportunity for better growth and safety to bonds, to bonds in your portfolio. That may be putting some fixed index annuities, in other words, may be a great way to offset some risk and increase your returns. So that's another one we can get into. And again, I'll have some pieces available for you. Another one from Virtue that Jeremy sent over that if you'd like to get a copy of is this piece on the, it's called Flash Market Memo, and it's going to get into a lot of what we're going to be talking about today with Phil. All right. Now, is Phil able to join us? Are we hooked in yet?
Good morning, Hank.
Here we go, because I can't see anything yet. I'm sorry. If we can switch my monitor over so I can catch him as well, that'd be good. All right, Phil, good morning.
Morning, Hank.
How you doing today?
Hanging in. It's been a tumultuous 48 hours.
I hope that I'm not sure if the viewers can hear. I'm having a little trouble picking it up. It's a little faint, but glad to have you with us. I'm going to turn this over a little bit on the piece that you sent me, this first slide. So Phil sent this part on Russia-Ukraine geopolitical considerations. And Phil, I'm going to write to that first slide on strong economic sanctions. If we can get that one up, and maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, Hank, I think the repercussions when we look at the Russian economy and the Ukrainian economy, what that means for global financial markets, I think the big impact that everyone is crystal clear on is the amount of exports that Russia and Ukraine
Wait, you can turn my volume up.
send to Western Europe in terms of both grains as well as oil and gas. And I think part of the reason we haven't seen more stringent restrictions and sanctions imposed upon Russia is because Germany, France, Italy, the better part of Western Europe is heavily dependent upon Russian oil and gas. Russia is now the second largest producer of oil and gas in the world. They've surpassed the Saudis. And so as a result, you've thrown in this additional element of risk for continental Europe, European markets. And that also rolls over to the United States. I think it's important for all the viewers to understand that we do live in a global economy, and 43% of U.S. sales are derived overseas. And so I think when you see a conflict in Russia and Ukraine, why is it so important? Why has it created so much volatility? It does not only impact Western Europe, but it also impacts U.S. exports and U.S. multinational companies. But the biggest impact is felt. A quarter of the world's grains are exported from Russia and Ukraine. We've had some really bad planting seasons in South America the last couple of years. And as a result, you're seeing food prices move up. And as you mentioned in the intro, Hank, that also spills over to what the Federal Reserve is going to do to help fight these inflationary pressures.
Is this going to be still the bigger concern than what's going on with Ukraine, Russia? And this is, but at the same time, the impact that it's having on what decisions the Federal Reserve might make. And what do you think there, Phil? What do you think this, the Chairman Powell and the Federal Reserve, they're going to look at this? And do you think this might cause them to maybe be a little less aggressive than they might otherwise be?
Absolutely, Hank. I think that's the direct repercussion. We're not sure how long this conflict with Russia and Ukraine is going to last, how far it spills over. One of the things that we do know, Hank, at least from we get great geopolitical research from around the globe. And I think there was a report this morning. The futures are positive again this morning, Hank, just based upon the news flow that Russia reached out to the Ukrainians to try to set a meeting, and we saw futures turn pretty sharply to the upside this morning once again. But I think a lot of what the Federal Reserve is going to do is dependent upon how long this conflict in Eastern Europe is going to last. But Hank, I think one of the important things, we always watch the Fed funds futures, as you know. What is the market pricing in for expectations? And there was a high probability of a 50 basis point hike for the March meeting. March 16th is the date of the FOMC meeting. And that has now dropped pretty precipitously. Now it's only a quarter point hike that's baked into the market. So I think the Ukrainian situation is going to affect what the Federal Reserve does in the quickness and speed with which they tighten monetary policy.
This is one of those areas that, let me go ahead and switch off here. Thank you. See if I can hear you a little bit better now, Phil. So one of the things that we're concerned about in watching the Federal Reserve and what they're going to be doing, this is going to have a bigger impact. You're thinking right now about a half a point, and that's why I'd wondered if with the Ukraine-Russia thing, do you think that impacted? Do you think they're still going to go with that half, or if we're going to have something maybe less so? And then also, of course, what's to come in future months as they meet further as far as rate increases. We're going to get into that, but first we're going to take a quick break. Join us here. We'll be right back on the Retirement Report.
This is a Storm 5 weather update. For weather on the go, download the Storm Shield app.
I'm News Channel 5 weekday morning meteorologist Nikki D. Ray. Here's a live look at the currents right here in Music City, USA. You'll notice visibility a little wonky, especially portions